Good afternoon, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to be here amongst my peers just 8 days before the first ball is bowled of this upcoming Ashes series, much anticipated. Hopefully Melbourne turns on the sunshine ahead of the Boxing Day Test. We do have a great panel to discuss all things on and off the field, of course. Things that are topical, things that have made headlines, and no doubt things that you guys want to hear about. We will discuss that for about half an hour, then I'll open it up to the floor for some questions from you for about another half an hour. We don't have a roving mic, so I do ask that when you do ask your questions, just to obviously speak up loud and to announce yourselves and to who the question is directed towards. Well, I'll start by introducing the former captain of Australia. He's one of the greatest batsmen of all time, considered a superb all-rounder. He's been a commentator, a coach, a selector. He recently, in fact just yesterday, had a street named after him. It's been changed from Bogan Street to Greg Chappell Street, not Greg Chappell Drive. Please put your hands together. One of the famous Chappell brothers, Greg Chappell.
Thank you.
We also have an award-winning scribe who will be talking to us with us today. He's been a journalist for over 35 years. He's a senior sports columnist and the associate editor of The Age. I didn't say 40 years. Please put your hands together for Greg Baum. We did clarify that before the lunch began. And also a former first-class bowler for Victoria who has certainly risen the ranks in administration of this wonderful game to the CEO of Cricket Australia. Please welcome James Sutherland. And I'm going to hand it over to James to say a few words before we begin.
Thanks, Tiffany. Thanks for that welcome. It's great to be here at the MCG, albeit with a little bit of rain around. And a place with so much cricket history. I think many of you will be aware the first ever Test match was played here in 1877, and there's been great Ashes series here ever since. The first one-day match was played here as well in 1971, and the MCG was the host of the 1992 World Cup final between England and Pakistan. And in about 16 months' time, it will host a World Cup final again. Hopefully that's involving Australia, but we're very proud and pleased to have the MCG as the host and continuing that great tradition. But before the World Cup, we've got a big Ashes series ahead of us, something we're really looking forward to. As Tiffany said, 8 days now till the Brisbane Test match starts, and 43 days before the Boxing Day Test match starts, and we go Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth in between times. An Ashes series always brings a very exciting time for cricket fans, great anticipation about what is ahead of us, and certainly this Ashes series is no different. We've got sell-out Test match crowds all around the country. Even here at the MCG, we are pretty well sold out for Boxing Day. There's a record Test match crowd of 90,800 that Stephen Goff and I quietly share as a KPI that we'd like to knock over before our time is out in our respective jobs. And I think we've been curbed in the past by Melbourne's weather in the last decade, but we're very hopeful that we might be able to do it this time. 90,800 is the mark, and I think it was 1961 that tied Test series with the West Indies. As you know, the selectors announced the 12-man squad for the first Test match. We often muse at Cricket Australia that there are 20 million unofficial selectors of the Australian cricket team with very strong opinions on what should go and what shouldn't go. And I think my reflection on the team that they've announced is that there's probably a little bit to debate and not much to argue with this time. And I think they've done a job that everyone was quietly confident they knew what the team was. So hopefully that's a good sign. Yesterday we also had our women's team gathering in Brisbane for the opening of the National Cricket Centre. And we have a big women's Ashes series coming up this year, a new format for the game with Test cricket, one-day cricket and 2020 cricket all going together, and certainly something that we're all looking forward to as we see a rise in women's cricket across the country. I mentioned the National Cricket Centre, and we might talk about that a little bit later on. And I note Michael Clark's comments that it's as good as anything in the world in terms of cricket facilities, and will hopefully help us turn our talent into performance as we go. And at grassroots level, cricket's well underway, and we are, according to the feedback I'm getting from our states and territories, we're well on track for record numbers of participants across the country this season. So there's a lot to look forward to, and we're very excited about it. Within cricket across the country, our vision is for cricket to be Australia's favourite sport and a sport for all Australians. And I guess there's a long list of things within that flows in terms of our strategy and our objectives. But perhaps top of the list is one of the things that I just mentioned before, and that's encouraging more kids to play the game. There are very significant challenges today in sport for getting kids to be more active, and we, like other sports, face that same challenge. As a father of young children and a coach of young cricketers, I feel qualified to talk about some of those challenges. Amongst other things, obviously, there's televisions and computer games that are a distraction that are very hard for parents to drag their kids away, and I guess a competitor to leisure time. But at the same time, sport and physical education is not a part of the school curriculum like it once was. And as well, our communities aren't, or it's certainly not perceived to be as safe as they once were. So that social or casual park cricket and cricket in the street doesn't happen like it used to. And parents are generally culpable as well. They're busier, they have less time, and they make decisions around the time that their kids have to play sport and follow their sporting pursuits. That is actually seeing kids play less cricket, less sport than they used to. We chase participants because we're chasing fans as well. We want to grow interest and passion in our sport, and we're very focused on that. But of all of the things we do, we know that the Australian public is most keen on the Australian team performance and Australian team success, and we're impatient for that success like everyone else, and hopefully it's not far away. From our perspective, we are going through a change process and a transition. We had a recent review, not so recent perhaps, 2 years ago, where a number of recommendations were implemented by a review chaired by Don Argus. Underneath all of those recommendations, there was, I guess, a fundamental and underlying recommendation for change to ensure that all of the moving parts of cricket are going in the right direction at high performance level. That's a significant change process that we're working through, and it sees all of those moving parts understanding not only the necessary alignment, but accepting that accountability and performance are the key attributes for us to achieve sustained success well into the future. I guess that success that we crave and desire is going to be very much about this Ashes series and a World Cup to come. There's a lot of other things changing in Australian cricket as well, with a new governance model for cricket, a new financial model, and us adapting to, as the media industry and other industries are, the changing needs of customers and their desire for that. Lots of challenges on the plate for us, and another one, I suppose, is the way we juggle the three formats of the game, and we need to be careful that we manage that accordingly. We have a focus and an unashamed conviction about Test cricket being the primary format of the game that we want to support, and I think from where we sit, it's very important that we get the balance right between the three formats. Test cricket might be the primary format, but we've also got to be very careful that we don't love Test cricket to death. And by that I mean that we don't focus all our attention on Test cricket, because our research shows that the longer format of the game faces challenges. It faces challenges here in Australia, but in other parts of the world as well. And we need to look for ways to attract new fans to the game and bring new people to the game. And that's certainly a really sharp focus for us. I'm sure that will come up, Tiffany, in a moment. So another summer is underway, and as always, it's a cricket provides an issues-rich environment for us to focus on. I look forward to discussion with these two esteemed gentlemen in a moment, and I thank you for listening, and hope you enjoy your summer. May the rain stop and the Ashes return. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Well, yesterday our side was announced, of course, for the Ashes. There was a number of, couple of selections of note, in particular Mitchell Johnson's recall, of course, after a blistering series over in India in the one-day series, and also George Bailey, the 31-year-old captain at Tasmania, one-day captain, who becomes the oldest Test player, batsman to make his debut Test in 34 years. There's been a number of queries over whether he can actually handle Test cricket, and I think that's really the first thing to throw to our former selector, Greg Chappell, in your thoughts on George Bailey's selection.
Yeah, I think it's a good selection. Obviously, we were expecting that he would be selected. He's had a wonderful 12 months or so in the limited overs teams, and I think that, allied with the fact that he's well regarded as a leader and as a person generally, I think is very positive. If he's going to play, this is the time he should be playing. He's had a really good few months in India, and he's in good form and good confidence. So, you know, he'll, I'm sure, acquit himself pretty well. And along with Mitch Johnson, again, I think it's a good selection. You know, Mitch has already shown for a number of years that pace is one thing that he does have, and I think England are considered to be a little bit vulnerable, some of their top order batsmen. So again, probably a fairly sensible selection. Brisbane and Perth, the first two Test matches, so if you're going to play someone that's a bit quick and can get the ball to bounce, they're the two places you'd want him to play.
Greg Baum, is there anyone that you believe has been unlucky missing out?
Oh, there's probably a lot of players that have been unlucky. It struck me when I looked at that team yesterday. You and I were at a Bradman oration a couple of weeks ago where Rod Marsh threw up the cheeky suggestion that T20 cricket should be limited to players over 30 in the future, so that the younger up-and-coming players were all concentrated on playing for Australia. Well, I think all bar two of this Test team could go and play T20 now on those terms. I don't have a problem with that, because I think that the Test team should always be our absolute best 11 as perceived by the selectors. It should never be a development team. And obviously there are periods in history where you're going through change, you're going through a state of flux, and you will have players in there that you're trying out to see if they fit. But it should always be the honest best 11 that you can come up with at the time. My qualm about George Bailey, and I'm the journalist, so I've got to throw up the negative, is that he seemed to be earmarked for this spot from a long way out. He seemed to be being picked about 2 or 3 months ago, and that yesterday just formalised his selection, and that is on the basis really of form in a very different theatre of the game, on ant-bed wickets in India with boundaries with no fieldsmen on them. Now going to play a Test match in Brisbane on a pitch that in the past has been, you know, difficult for batsmen, let's say. At the best of times, it's perhaps not quite that way anymore, but it's still an authentic Test wicket. And George's a terrific bloke. I don't know him that well, but he's clearly a good bloke. If we pick a team of good blokes for every Test match, and they wouldn't get very far. He averaged 18 last summer in Australia in first-class cricket. He played county cricket during the winter and averaged 37. They're not outstanding figures to take into a Test series, but against that, he's there now, so let's wish him well.
James, the one-day series in India, the benefits of that to Australia in terms of our preparation. I mean, Greg's obviously just touched on it, but your thoughts on the benefits in terms of preparing Australia for the Ashes?
Yeah, look, I think you can look at our preparation whichever way you choose to. You can look at it. I read from time to time sort of some negative suggestions around that preparation, but I actually see that our preparation has been very good for this series. I think there's been a lot of cricket played by a lot of players, and I think one of the things that's not often talked about is that the preparation is now not so much about a team, it's about an individual, and we think about every individual player and what their preparation is over a period of time, particularly for a big series. And there weren't actually a lot of players who were playing in the Test team in Brisbane who were actually in India. And at the same time, there were a lot of players who were back here who were playing Ryobi Cup who have been able to play in the first couple of rounds of Shield cricket and had a really good preparation. We've had a lot more cricket than England have over the last couple of months. So don't tell me we haven't had a good preparation, because England have hardly played.
What about Rodney Hogg's comments, Greg Chappell? He came out today on the back of the selection of the team saying that we have one player that averages with about over 40. England have 6. We have one bowler who's taken over 200 test wickets, and England have 3. Yet he still thinks we can win. How can we win?
Well, we're going to have to play well. There's no doubt about that. And I mean, Hoggy's a fast bowler. You can't believe everything that fast bowlers tell you. I mean, haven't had too many captains of Australia who've been fast bowlers, and there's a very good reason for that.
One is the chief executive.
But he wasn't that quick, so he's all right. But the fact of the matter is that England have been a good side. There's no doubt about that, and they are a good side. And we'll have our work cut out beating them this summer. We'll have to bowl well. We'll have to field well. We'll have to bat well. All the usual cliches. England perhaps aren't as good as they have been. They're struggling to work out their bowling attack at the moment. And it's a very fine balance between a team at its top and a team that's gone over the edge or has come off the top. And I played in sides and played in series, not least of all my first series as captain of Australia. We beat the West Indies 5-1. We knew we weren't that much better than the West Indies, but we were an experienced team who knew how to win. They were an inexperienced team that didn't know how to win. And that's similar to where we're at with England and Australia at the moment. England has had a lot of success in recent times. They know how to win, and they play accordingly and plan accordingly. When you haven't won for a while, you get into positions where you might win and you start looking over your shoulder and wondering how you might lose it. That's the difference between those two teams. But England without Bresnan, they're sort of struggling to find their third seam bowler, and they may well decide on one of them, and he may well have a good series, and that'll overcome that problem. But if they're a bowler short, it'll make a big difference to them. Swan won't have as much impact in Australia as he had in England. He'll bowl well, he'll bowl some good spells, and I have no doubt he'll get some wickets, but he won't have the influence that he might have had in England. So that makes a difference. So if we can get a good start, and if we can start to put some partnerships together and put some pressure back on them, I think we saw in the series in England, when they had the pressure on them, they didn't react that well, and they didn't handle it that well. So that's how we win. We get into positions where we put pressure on them and make them work a lot harder than they've had to work in the past.
I think history's certainly on our side. I don't think they've won in Brisbane since 1986, so that certainly augurs well. But talk about confidence and learning how to win. James, the directive from Cricket Australia to the curators, obviously just recently has been to make them fairer pitches, not as green top, to provide the opportunity for the batsmen to stay longer in the middle and for the spin bowlers to get more of a turn. We have seen over two games from last year to this year, certainly an improvement in terms of half centuries, from 39 this year to 23 at the same time last year, and also the number of wickets taken. I think it's something like in spin wickets 65 to 11. So certainly there's been a significant improvement. How much do you think this will impact?
Well, I think it's it's sort of a long-term issue. We have been concerned that some of the Shield matches haven't been going the distance. Every match this year has actually gone to the last session of the last day, which we think is a really good sign. There are suggestions of sharp practices from time to time in terms of preparing wickets that get a result, but that might well be just a function of the point system, and that's certainly something that we'll look at, where there are more points at stake if you can get an outright result, and that's something that we'll review over the course of this summer. But the fundamental thing for us is that Shield cricket is not about determining who the champion state team is. That's incidental. The real thing about Shield cricket is that it needs to prepare cricketers for international cricket, and particularly Test cricket. And therefore the environment in which they're playing should be as much like Test cricket as possible. So we want those pitches, we don't want those pitches to be barren roads. We want those pitches to be like, we want the Gabba pitch to be like the first day pitch of a Gabba Test match. And that's, so the instruction to the curators is very much around that, to make sure that it's a fair contest between bat and ball. And I add to that, Tiffany, we played 9 test matches away this year. We have not seen a blade of grass or a drop of moisture on any of those pitches. We have to learn to play in those conditions, and to do that, I think teams we've played against have quite blatantly tried to exploit a perceived weakness we have batting against spin and perhaps not having frontline spin bowlers. And perhaps they've done that well because we haven't won too many test matches out of those 9. But the point is that we need to have our batsmen facing spin, we need our batsmen to bat longer, and we need our spin bowlers to be given more opportunities. In the first 2 rounds of this year, our spin bowlers have bowled 3 times as many overs as they had the same time last year.
Greg Baum, James mentioned just earlier that we've played a lot of cricket, and but we had a chat earlier. In your opinion, are we playing the right style of cricket, right amount of cricket, going over to India and the Big Bash League? Is this going to augur well for preparing us for Test cricket?
No, I don't think we've got the balance right yet. I take James's point that there's 3 forms that have to be accommodated, and in the board's point of view, they're all equally important to the future of the game. But the schedule for this summer is, well, interesting to say the least. By December the 13th, we will have played, or even early, December the 11th perhaps, we will have played every state will have played 6 of their 10 Shield matches. The whole Ryobi Cup, the one-day competition, will have been played. That's come and gone already. And 3 of the 5 test matches, and the sort of all of December and January has been cleared for the Big Bash League. Now, I'm not sure that's the best way to continue to prepare players over the course of the summer. It's been a good preparation for picking a team for the first test, but we've got teams to pick for 4 more tests. And 3 of those will occur in a period when there's no other like cricket going on in the country. And we also run the risk of bowlers breaking down. Six first-class matches in 6 weeks is a lot of cricket
Shane
for a
Watson,
bowler.
of course, is
Watson's played all year. We talked about this too in something like 13 or 14
Yep.
different series or tournaments in 3 different forms in 3 different countries, and you could almost predict that he'd come home from India with an injury that now has to be accommodated during the first test. So, and yet, it occurred to me in a discussion yesterday with Cameron White that when we get to the Big Bash League period of the season, the height of summer, December and January, when the kids are on holidays, the parents are on holidays, some of them as well, when you want people going to the cricket, apart from the test matches, there's the Big Bash League, and sometimes there's gaps of 9-10 days between the stars playing here and playing the next match. It seems to me that the balance is far from ideal at the moment.
James, how do we find that balance? I mean, your directive is obviously to increase the game, to grow it, as you said, to become Australia's favourite sport and sport for all Australians. We've seen the purple patch ever of the sport in history in Australia, with a $500 million media rights deal. Just yesterday, the opening of the Centre of Excellence, $29 million. More eyes than ever watching the game in terms of the Big Bash League. But how do we find that balance?
Yeah, look, I think it's about optimisation, because there's no perfection here, and Greg's raised a number of challenges and issues that we're trying to balance all of the time, and we agonise over these things all of the time, and we don't have. I read a lot of comment about how we've got it wrong, but I don't read a lot of comment about what the solutions are to the problem or the challenge, and that perhaps summarises the point here, is that there isn't a perfect solution, but what we're trying to do is to create a balance and an opportunity. I mean, we talk about this period of Test cricket during the summer. We've had a situation where Brisbane, for example, hosts the first Test match of the summer and then doesn't have any cricket of interest in Brisbane for 2.5 months. And what the Big Bash League has done, for example, is actually brought premium cricket content into that environment. So fans that Greg talks about, families that Greg talks about, can actually come along to the cricket in that time when there's cricket on TV, but in the evening they can go along and actually sample live cricket as well, where there's a good crowd and a great atmosphere. We have a challenge in Australia that is different to, say, England, where our season is the Southern Hemisphere summer, and that season is shared by 7 or 8 other countries. So what that means from an international perspective is the Future Tours program is built on reciprocal arrangements between countries, and in order for us to have and protect our prime summer period of that November, December, January period, we need to reciprocate on the shoulders of our international season. So that October, November period, that February, March period, is a period that we have to play, the Australian team has to play overseas in order to reciprocate. That creates challenges. It means that our players play for a long time in a row, a long period of time in a row. But it also then creates sort of cascading effects on our domestic program. We think that the Big Bash League is making a contribution. We see our numbers in that it's bringing new people to the game. And the day the Big Bash League isn't bringing new people to the game is the day that we will review its relevance. But today it's bringing new people to the game. I think 15% of attendees last time hadn't been to a cricket match before, and 50% of the people are coming along as family units, where ordinarily that doesn't happen with international cricket.
Greg Chappell, I read with interest the prologue in your autobiography, and you spoke about I think it was your last meeting with Sir Donald in the car park at the Adelaide Oval, and you spoke for about an hour with him, and one of the key topics was you asked him the question about why he was so against the players at the time, back in the mid-70s, receiving a pay rise. I think you're getting about $200 a game. And he answered simply that it was he believed that the game is a pastime and it's not a business, and when it becomes a business you lose some of the essence of what it is. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I could understand what Sir Donald was saying, and I think there is some truth in it, but the fact of the matter is that the world's changed a great deal in the last 50 years that I can talk about, and it certainly has changed for sport, and it is big business, and there's a lot of competition out there. You know, socially, the life is very different from when I grew up. I know, we've got 3 adult children. Our 2 boys spent probably 50% of the time outdoors that we spent as kids, and their kids are spending less time outdoors than they did, because there's many more competing things for them. Cricket and football were the big sports when we were growing up, and most schools now offer 20 sports to the students. So there's a lot of competition out there, and I just think that rather than, and it's very easy, and I can understand how people will find the negatives and will bemoan this and bemoan that, but I just think we've got to suck it up and get on with it. I mean, this is what we've got. We've got to find a way, and I'm involved with all of our development programs, and it's an exciting time. The kids are excited about playing cricket, and they're excited about the fact that there are more options than just test cricket. It's very difficult. I mean, it's hard enough in Australia. I spent time in India with 1.3 billion people. Only 11 of them can play test cricket at any one time. At least the options are far greater for young athletes to play cricket now than ever before. And as a coach, it's challenging to come up with ways of trying to develop them to be able to cope with the most demanding time that has ever been for young athletes in cricket. They've got to be more adaptable physically, mentally, emotionally than ever before. I think it's exciting. And the kids that are coming up, they don't know what it was like 50 years ago. They don't give a shit, really, what it was like 50 years ago. This is what they've got. We've got to think about ways that we can make it better for them and help them to survive and prosper in that environment. And 2020 cricket cops a fair bake, and I don't agree with all of it. From a coaching point of view, the acceptance of this short form cricket is great, because it's a great coaching tool, and it's how you use those tools that's going to be important. Look, we're going through an adjustment period. These kids are coming. Some of them are the pathfinders as far as the changes in cricket, but future generations will have grown up with Big Bash cricket, Test cricket, Ryobi Cup cricket, all competing through the summer, and they'll just accept that as part of it. So we're going through a transition in so many areas, but with that comes challenges, but with that comes excitement, and I'm excited to be part of it, and I know the kids that I'm working with are really excited, and thankfully we do have some talent out there, and most of them want to play Test cricket.
Let's just stick with you for a minute. Obviously, yesterday as well, we had the opening of the new Centre of Excellence in Brisbane, $29 million facility. You were there. Just give us, those of us, and probably most of us in the room certainly weren't there, can you just give us a snapshot of what we can expect and why it's so exciting?
Well, it's just a magnificent facility. Cricket's very lucky to have had the support of government at all levels to be able to bring a facility like that to life. It's state of the art, it's up to the minute. You couldn't ask for much better. Again, it's very, very exciting to think that we've got that facility available to us. We've been very lucky with that facility at the Centre of Excellence, now the National Cricket Centre, having the outdoor facilities that are there at Albion at the end of Greg Chappell Street. It's a real honour to be getting in the cab and asking to go to Greg Chappell Street. Mind you, none of the cabbies knew where it was, but that's okay. It's an address that I'm proud to be involved in, and it's a facility that again is very exciting. We won't get the buggers outside. They won't want to go outside. There's so much on offer there at the indoor centre. Cricket can do all of its testing. We pick after the under 17 and under 19 championships in December and January each year. We pick the 26 of the best under 18 kids in the country, and we take them to Brisbane in February. We used to have to send them down to Canberra in the middle of it to do all their testing at the AIS. We can do all that in Brisbane now. There's great indoor facilities, there's swimming facilities, there's rehab facilities. I've been around the world looking at sporting facilities in recent years, and there's nobody that's got a better facility than we've got at the moment. Now, that in itself doesn't produce cricketers, and successful cricketers. It's part of a whole package that we've got available to us to develop cricketers. But as far as the 1%ers are concerned, it really gives us an opportunity to be able to finish those guys and girls off that will use that facility. It's a cracker.
Greg, as a media representative, obviously the $500 million media rights deal is fantastic for the game, but is it, in your opinion, the fragmentation of it, what are your thoughts on that? And cricket at CATV, is there perhaps a possibility of some bias commentary? Is this positive for the game? What are your thoughts?
Bias commentary. Well, the AFL is going through the same experience at the moment and a little bit ahead of Cricket Australia in that regard, setting up their own media unit and clearly with a view to one day mounting their own coverage of the game. The media unit is going out of its way to be seen to be independent and robust. How long they can sustain that for, I'm not sure, and whether cricket can do the same thing or not, I'm not sure. But my fear, when we're talking about the place of T20 in the game, and obviously that's going to be a crucial part of telecasting of cricket from now on, is that is not so much with the game itself. I agree with Greg that I didn't see a better innings played last summer than Aaron Finch's 100 in the opening match last summer for the red team against the green team, or whatever they were. It's more if we're to take people along, as James is saying, and clearly it's far too early to say whether that's the case or not, although there's encouraging signs. It's that the infantilisation of the promotion of the game with the exploding balls and exploding bats and lights and sirens all over the place. I don't know that that's really going to take us very far if this is the way of the future. I mean, the fact is we're talking about cricket. It's a different form, but it's still cricket. If we're trying to make cricket football, and sometimes it does feel like that when we're talking about club sides and massive player movement, it never will be. It's a different game. We learned through one-day cricket that which everyone initially thought you played by hitting the ball as hard and far as you could and bowling as fast as you could, and in the end, medium-slow bowlers came to dominate and trying to knock every ball at the over for one. And even in T20 cricket now, a surprising to me development is the crucial role that spinners have played in the playing of the game. Something to be celebrated, but let's acknowledge that we're playing cricket, not some form of summer super football.
What is the number one thing that concerns you about the game? Is that it?
Yeah, it's fitting everything in, and it's preserving. I mean, I don't want to sound like an old fart, but preserving Test cricket for the the beauty of it, and that's what we're going to celebrate this summer. Has the interest in this summer series is quite instructive. I think we're a long way behind England, or so it seems at the moment. We've certainly lost our last 3 series to them, and the expectations are we'll lose this one. But my sense is that hasn't dampened enthusiasm towards Test cricket in this country. It's whetted it. And it was the same when we were so far behind the West Indies for all those years. There was never a sense that, oh, well, let's give up and go and play something else. It was always, let's work for the day, let's find the weapon, let's get on top of these guys. And we did. So I guess I accept everything that James says about the division of responsibilities and looking to what we must do in the future. I just would like to make sure that we honour Test cricket as we do it.
James?
We do, Tiff. I guess the point there for us is that, as I said earlier on, Test cricket is the premium format of the game. That's we are out there in our strategy in saying that. And the reason why we invest in the Big Bash League, which incidentally doesn't make money for Cricket Australia, it's not a money-making exercise, it's an investment in the future of the game. But the reason why we do that is because we want Test cricket to live forever. And right now, Test cricket has huge problems in different parts of the world. And it's fundamentally flawed as a game. You think about it, you've got a sport that is played over 5 days, 3 of which are weekdays, only 2 of which are weekends. And what do people do on those days? They're at work or they're at school or whatever. Tell me what sport operates in that environment. That's one of the reasons why I'm a great promoter of trying to play Test cricket at night. We need to go into the space where we fish where the fish are. We're in a great position in Australia because Test cricket is still loved and adored, and I'm at the top of the list in loving that. But the reason why I am passionate about bringing new people to the game is we have to secure the future of cricket. And by doing that, we're securing the future of Test cricket because it's the premium format of the game. That's what it's all about. Bring people to the game and they will graduate their interest levels to Test cricket.
Go where the fish are. Women's cricket. Obviously, it's not just the men's Ashes. We've got the women's Ashes. It's a best of 7 series. Unfortunately, the ladies lost it over in the English summer. They lost the urn, but we've got the first test at the WACA on the 10th of January. We've seen Cricket Australia lead the way in terms of women's team sport in this country, in terms of pay. And you know, we've certainly seen the rise of the profiles of our Australian women's Southern Stars. How big an importance do you place on women in terms of the development of the game, not just in terms of the team, but across the field?
Look, I think we've got a fantastic group of ladies who make up the Commonwealth Bank Southern Stars right now. They're great ambassadors for cricket and they're great role models for young girls, for not just to play cricket but to play sport in general. And we're very proud of the fact that we've put them on a pay scale that is a significant jump up from most female pay scales. But our attitude to females in cricket is very much a holistic thing. We want more girls to play cricket. I think we're up to about 20% of our playing base now is female. If you go back 5 or 6 years, it was something like 8 or 9%. Part of that, though, is, again, it's about securing the future of the game because females make decisions in households. They make decisions about what families do on weekends, what they do in their leisure time, and what sports kids play. If mothers of kids don't have any affinity or understanding of the game of cricket, then the chances are they will elect some other sport as a preference. And it's a really important thing for us. It might be a long-term cycle, long-term investment for us, but it's very important that there's a great affinity amongst the females in the community with cricket. And it comes back again. The Big Bash League is part of that. Our research said 5 years ago that females were not as interested in cricket. I know there's lots of females that are, plenty in this room. no doubt. But in a general sense, our numbers were lower and they were turning off for whatever reason. And now we've got families coming together with mums and daughters and enjoying the cricket and hopefully being proponents of our game.
Just on that, when will we see a women's Big Bash League?
Oh look, it's on the drawing boards for us. I wouldn't want to put a timeline on it, but it's something that we have hopes for. I think we've said the 2020 format of the game is the premium format for women, and we've actually, over the course of the last few years, very pleasingly been able to get women's cricket on television where it's never been on TV before. The females this year again. The three 2020 matches against England will be shown live on Channel 9, leading into the men's games. That's a great thing for women's sport, which is really struggling for television coverage.
I'll ask one more question to Greg and before I open up to the floor. Greg, this morning we saw the ticketing of the prices of the ICC World Cup 2015. So a family of four can now go and watch the cricket for $50, I think it is. It's $20 for adults and $5 for kids. Obviously, the tickets go on sale on Valentine's Day, so they're hoping that people fall in love with the game if they haven't already. How much do you see this growing the game, the ICC World Cup?
Look, I think it's an important thing. Again, the 50-over game's probably been under threat like never before. It's been around for 40 years, the best part of. And it's evolved quite a bit. As James said, Test cricket is a bit of a struggle for some countries. I know how much we spend on the development of cricketers in this country. There's a lot of countries that can't spend that sort of money. So Test cricket is, for them to produce competitive Test teams is really difficult. But they can all be competitive in 50-over cricket and 20-over cricket. I think the World Cup's going to be pretty exciting. We saw in India just recently the series between Australia and India. We competed very well, and India are number one in the world in one-day cricket. So they'll be the team to beat. Playing them in our conditions will be different from playing them in their conditions. So the fact that we make it accessible for families to come along is fantastic, because I think it's going to be another wonderful showpiece for cricket here in 2015. And I think, for a format that I think is a terrific format of the game, and maybe for some countries, their Test cricket for the future. And I think it's really important that we preserve 50-over cricket and make sure we look after it.
All right, we've got 20 minutes, so I'm going to open it up to the floor. And we have a school here, Kilvington Grammar, on table 9. So why don't we ask one or two of the students to kick us off with the first question. If you could stand up and just with a loud voice, because we don't have a microphone. Thank you.
That's very good question. Thanks, Maddie. Look, I think from my perspective as a player, I think the most important thing about cricket is really enjoying your cricket and having a lot of fun with it. I look back as a player and I think about the great camaraderie that comes from cricket. It's an interesting game because you actually spend half the game. Well, if you're not very good at batting, like I wasn't very good at batting, you actually spend half the game on the sidelines talking with your mates, which is a great thing to do, and you're watching a couple of your teammates bat. But I think the thing is to really take your opportunities and to enjoy your cricket. Find yourself a good coach and work really hard at it, and encourage you to keep at it, because the Commonwealth Bank Southern Stars need girls like you, Maddie.
I think
He's still playing, and probably for the right price you could headhunting.
I think it's a good question also for Greg Chappell. Greg, obviously captain of Australia, but your grandfather gave you some advice. Again, I read that in your biography. He played for Australia, he played in the Borderlands series with Sir Donald. What was the advice that he gave you?
Well, again, I think it's about enjoying the game, but as a young batsman, the great encouragement I got from both my grandfather and my father was that you've got a bat in your hands, learn to use it properly. You're out there to score runs, and I think that was a really important piece of advice in my early years. Obviously, having a couple of brothers, one older and one younger, was really helpful to be able to try a lot of things out in the backyard. I was on the receiving end for a few years from my older brother, but I luckily had a chance to lord it over my younger brother and learn how to win after that, having been on the receiving end for many years. But I think it's really challenging yourself. It's a little bit like life, and sport is very much a microcosm of life. And it struck me when we were talking about some of the other things earlier. You know, sport is an expression of what's happening in the world, and we've gone through great change, and sport is going through great change. But there's some great lessons in sport for life, I think, and cricket, because of the length of time that it takes. Some of the great life lessons that I've got came from the game of cricket. And I remember listening to somebody speak many years ago. He was talking about something totally unrelated to sport. I think it was, someone who'd been successful in business, and I'd heard a lot of people speak, about the success in their life, in their chosen field. And I walked away from that talk, and it dawned on me that they were all saying the same thing, that there are key components of any endeavour, and the people that are successful work out what those key components are, and they focus on getting good at them. So I think if you want to be good at something, work out what the key components are and then focus on getting good at them and being better than the rest of them.
Do we have another student from table 9? If yes? Yep.
My name's Quinn. Question for Mr. Sharple. What do you think is going to be key to Australia beating England in the Test?
Thanks, Quentin. We've got to make more runs and take more wickets, I think. We're going to have to be a lot smarter than them. Test cricket is not a sprint. It's a long, drawn-out contest, and there are periods when you're on top and there are periods when you're behind. There are moments in every test match where you can take a hold of that test match, and I think we're going to have to be better than England in those areas, recognising when we've got a chance to take hold of a game, or to recognise that we're under the pump here at the moment. We've got to fight our way through this to come out on the other side of it and give ourselves a chance to win. And if you're in front, make sure that you keep doing the things that you need to do to stay in front. So we're going to have to be better at England at all those things. As I said before, England perhaps a bit more experienced than us at the moment at winning. We've got to start to understand what those key components are of winning and make sure we're good at those moments. And if we can do that, I think the series is a lot closer than most people would suggest at this stage. England will talk it up. They're the team that have won 3 series in a row, and they've every right to talk it up. But it's got bugger all to do with the talking. It's about who's going to play well at the time, and we need to make sure we do all the right things and give ourselves the best chance to win.
Time for a few more questions. Yep, do you want to stand up?
Yeah, hi. My name's Tao Pellizzeri from Metro Media Publishing. My question's for anyone on the panel. Between January and April of 2015, there'll be the Asian Cup Soccer and the Cricket World Cup back-to-back. Where cricket previously had no summer competitor, is there a risk that these 3 months could serve as a referendum on the popularity of the #1 summer sport?
Good luck, James.
Yeah, look, it's absolutely true. There's in certain parts of the country, the Asian Cup will be played. I think it's mostly in January from memory in 2015, and then we have February, March, which will be the Cricket World Cup. I think that Greg was talking about it before. It's one of the really significant changes in the sporting landscape, and it extends through into the school environment. See Martin Dalton here from Monash University. The university environment changes where so many sports are on offer, but that's society today. It's about giving different choices. It's not that long ago that it was footy in winter and cricket in summer, and that's the competitive environment we live in. We compete for sponsorship, for media rights, for cricketing talent, for participants, and all those sorts of things. And there's no doubt there's a lot of good things that are happening in soccer, round ball football at the moment. It's a sport that's on the rise. I mean, it's not necessarily on the rise in different parts of the world where it's a predominant sport. It's prolific, and I guess we as a sport are focused on what we need to do to ensure the future of cricket. That's in our role as administrators of the game. We're passionate about ensuring cricket's future, and ultimately the judges of how good a job we do will be in 10, 15, 20 years' time, where the questions will be answered as to whether cricket continues to be relevant to contemporary Australian society. And that's what we're all about, making sure that it is.
I think the soccer's made a couple of mistakes that cricket can avoid. One has been a tool this year to confine its television coverage to pay TV. I think this A-League season has made a thumping start, and it's partly to do with the fact that there's a game on free-to-air every week. It just seems to have raised the level of attention and conversation about the league again. And I think cricket, I'm sure you're sorely tempted to hide it all away behind a lucrative paywall, but I think that would be a mistake. And the other one is in the Australian context, one of the things I certainly struggle with about the A-League, and I think others do as well, is the fluid nature of the teams. There's a high turnover of players at every club every year, and it's really hard to get to know your club and your team. And I think that is a risk with the Big Bash League. If it is to succeed as a club-based competition, then I think you've got to be careful about having 11 different faces turn up every year in your team's colours.
It's great to hear Greg celebrating the fact that the Big Bash League's on free-to-air television this year on Network 10. Thanks for that, Greg.
Then we had a question here. Yep, Clive.
James Polly Salto from The Age. If winning's only an incidental part of the Sheffield Shield and it essentially becomes a development competition, don't you risk producing cricketers who are less competitive and softer?
Yeah, look, I'm not in any way downplaying the importance of creating a competitive environment. That's absolutely right. But we're investing perhaps $30 million a year into Sheffield Shield cricket, and ultimately what we want there is a competitive environment where we can drive cricketers to learn how to be successful. And I know perhaps Greg might like to comment on this because I know he's passionate about this aspect. It's creating absolutely that right environment for success. But and so my point there earlier on is that it came up in the context of Sheffield Shield pitches, and the context there is that there were perhaps some sharp practices going on, or there was a temptation to chase the outright result in order to get the 6 points in order to climb the Sheffield Shield ladder. And to some extent that's natural to want to be the winning team to qualify for the final. And perhaps that's inherent in all of that is that there's something wrong with our point system if that's creating incentives that go the wrong way. I stand by the comment that ultimately what we want is for a really strong competitive Sheffield Shield environment that delivers Test cricketers who can play winning cricket for Australia.
Yes.
Bruce McDonald, Swinburne University. As I recall, you go back years, you had people like Lillian Thompson, you had McGrath, you had going back to Max Walker and Merv Hughes and so on, who really never broke down. And yet now, and the team was consistent and solid, and everyone knew what was going on and what they would do. Now, all our fast bowlers seem to be breaking down regularly, coming back from a series, and we don't have that same consistency. You know, if I go back further, I've heard now, I'm too young obviously to hear about Devil and Davidson, but yeah, same thing.
Yeah, look, it's obviously a concern that we share about our young fast bowling talent and a number of players that are broken down. But if you go through that list of players that you've just mentioned, and there are plenty more, to a man at some stage in their career they broke down. And most likely it happened early in their career. Certainly Dennis Lilly's one that comes to mind. Jeff Lawson is another one. They were out for 18 months. That's fact. The reality is that young people's bones don't mature and strengthen and harden until, particularly males, I should say, in their early mid-20s. We've got a couple of players that have had stress injuries in recent times, and they're on the recovery. We actually believe that we've got a really strong batch of young fast bowling talent that will stand Australia in really strong stead in the years to come. At the moment, they have challenges because their bodies are still maturing. A couple of those guys, Pattinson, for example, and Stark, have bowled as many balls for their age in Test cricket as any other previous Australian fast bowler, except for Craig McDermott and Graham McKenzie. So they've had a high level of workload. They've had a lot of Test experience. When their bodies are even stronger, I'm very confident they'll be great cricketers for Australia.
Yeah, I think, Bruce, the other thing is there's less downtime for young bowlers these days than there were in the past. There were natural sort of breaks that gave young bodies a chance to rest and recover, and whereas they're not getting those opportunities now. But just following on from James's last point, we've got 5 or 6 young fast bowlers under 24 years of age who bowl 140 plus. When you've got a good fast bowling attack, you're not far away from being a great team, and I think we're not that far away. We're probably a couple of years away yet from being at the peak of that, but I think the upside for us is really strong. We've just got to understand how to manage these guys through that period, and we understand it really well. The science is now pretty strong about how best to do it and what the warning signs are and how to try and minimise the impact. What we've got to have with the 3 formats and more cricket being played is a bank of fast bowlers to make sure that we've always got good ones available to us. There's no doubt that we'll want to pick the best fast bowling attack we've got at any given time, but we certainly don't want to get to a stage where we're breaking these guys down and they're not going to be able to reach their potential in the next few years. So again, it's about management. The Cricket Australia and the selectors have copped a bit of hiding in recent times about rotations and all that sort of stuff, but it really is about managing these young athletes, and they're great assets for Australian cricket, and having to do it really well. You take football, the tall forwards, the ruckmen, they're the ones who take time to develop because they have the same problems.
I guess, and just to finish that point off, Bruce, conversation with Cameron White earlier this week, he made the point that you think of T20 as a short game, and the bowlers only bowl 4 overs. Can't be that hard, can't be that stressful, but he made the point that fast bowlers bowl their fastest in T20 because you only have 4 overs, and you've got to bowl your fastest, and you might do it in 4 different spells, and you can't warm up for the spell. You've got to be bowling that fast from the first ball of the spell. So in its own way, it puts a whole new set of stresses on a young fast bowler.
Time for one more question. Yes.
Stephen Clark from Swinburne University. We have lots of stats that measure the batting ability or bowling ability of bowlers, but nothing really to measure the captaincy skills. Does the panel have any comments on the various captaincy characteristics of the 2 captains, and how important is that to winning a test match?
It's your skipper.
I think the stats are called wins and losses. Usually a pretty good way to judge whether you've had a successful captain or not. Obviously, it depends a little bit on the talent you've got available at the time. I think England captains and Australian captains have always been a bit different. I think we've been a little bit more of the risk-taking type. England have perhaps been a little more risk-averse with their approach to captaining cricket, to playing cricket generally. I remember in my early Test matches against England, Ray Illingworth was the England captain, and it surprised me the way he went about it. It was different from any way that any Australian captain that I'd played against up to that time went about it, but there were some really good aspects of it that I learned from. When a new batsman came in, he tended to attack them. And then if they settled in a bit, then he would start to defend a bit more. And so it's getting the balance right between attacking and defending. I think we've generally been more attacking than English captains. And Michael Clarke, I think, is an attacking captain. There were some quotes I saw from him today. The headlines sort of suggested that he was being a bit critical of Cook, but I don't think that was what his intention was. He was just talking about he captains the team a little bit differently than maybe the way Alistair Cook does. It depends a little bit on what you've got available to you at the time. That definitely has some impact on it. But sport, again, is like life. It's about risk and reward. You've got to understand what the risks are and try and manage those risks to get the outcomes that you're looking for. the sort of traits, you've got to have that sort of gambling spirit. You've got to be a bit of a risk taker, I think. You've got to be reasonably confident in your own decision-making ability. Understand the game is really important, to understand what decisions you should be taking at what time, and you've got to be a good communicator. It's like any leadership role. Letting people know what their roles are, patting them on the back when they need to be patted on the back, and it might not necessarily be a day where they've had their greatest day, but something that they've done to contribute to the team effort should always be recognised. Somebody once said to me years ago, I think it was a bit like parenting. Find things that they do well to give them a bit of encouragement. It's very easy to be critical when they do things wrong, but I think you've got to find excuses to give them a bit of encouragement and try and create the sort of environment that encourages people to back themselves and bring the best out of those individuals. The best captains that I ever played under or played against had that ability, and more so than the next tier of captains.
It's a diabolically hard job captaining a test team. Greg, a long time ago you told me about your first morning as a test captain and what was taken to be a masterstroke of field placement.
It was purely accidental. Look, it's challenging. I captained a state team for probably 4 years before I captained the Australian team, and I still wasn't ready for it. And I'd stood alongside my elder brother at slip, and he'd captained the team before me. I thought I had a pretty good handle on it. But there are things that you don't appreciate until they happen under your watch, and you're the one that's actually got to make some decisions. I mean, the worst decision I had to make on that first day was Clem Jones was the Lord Mayor of Brisbane, also happened to be the curator at the Gabba at the time. Clem was the only bloke I knew that couldn't grow grass in Queensland. He had this rolled mud wicket that he'd thrown a few grass cuttings on, and it was still wet, and the West Indies perhaps weren't at their peak at that stage, but they still had some pretty good fast bowlers. And luckily, I didn't win the toss. Clive Lloyd lost the toss because the visiting captain calls. That was a great lesson that I learned in that series. Clive Lloyd had to call in 6 test matches. He changed his call in every test match, and he lost 5 tosses. I made a decision there and then that I would call the same thing every time and take my chances. And it worked out pretty well. But I won the toss and sent the West Indies into bat that day, and Dennis Lilly was the opening bowler, and I set my field. Ian had said to me, having stood down from the captaincy the summer before, look, you know where I am if you need me. I'm not going to interfere, but if you need me, I'm just over here. And I looked around after the third ball I bowled. I had nobody in front of the wicket on the offside. So luckily Dennis took a wicket in the first over, got Gordon Greenidge out, and while we sort of congregated and congratulating Dennis for the first wicket, I suggested to our second gully that maybe he should go and field in the covers. We probably needed someone in front of the wicket. Ian would have been biting his tongue at that stage, I reckon.
Just before we wrap up, I think it's such a pertinent point, and it would be remiss of us to not ask James in terms of success of a captain, success of a CEO. There's been question marks over your governance recently, obviously with the lack of on-field success. You qualify that then with the massive off-field success. Where do you draw the line in the sand in terms of a successful presiding over this game?
James in his peak wouldn't have helped us on the field, I can tell you that.
I think that's absolutely true.
He had it all over Graham Hick one day there at the Junction Oval.
Look, it's like anything, any job you do your best, Tiffany, and it's a great honour to do the job that I do, and I'm very lucky that I work at Cricket Australia with a fantastic group of people that are passionate about cricket, and they're passionate about cricket's future, and our really strong desire to make sure that cricket is a mainstream sport in Australia for centuries to come. I don't make the judgments about my performance, but I'm very clear about what I need to do and what I need to deliver and what role I'm playing in that. And I'm clear about that because the board of Cricket Australia tells me that, and they reinforce those messages to me. So we've got some really good challenges ahead of us. We're in a really significant period of change at the moment, which I think we're making a pretty good fist of. But amongst all those challenges is is winning back the Ashes. And as Greg noted, there's not much I can do about that except offer Michael and Darren best wishes and all the support in the world. But there's a lot of other things for us to put our nose to the grindstone about, and that's what we're doing.
Well, here's to winning back the Ashes. Please put your hands together for our panellists, Greg Chatfield, James Sullivan and Greg Baum. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you very much, everyone. Let's enjoy the summer.
Thanks, Tiff.
Cheers. Thank you.